You're listening to How I Made It, the Streamline podcast. For musicians, podcasters, video makers, graphic designers, and more, Streamline is the collaboration platform to build your creative future. We turn chaos into creativity. Check us out at www.streamline-media.net. This edition of the Streamline podcast, How I Made It, is an interview with Tony Churnside. Tony is a radio and audio expert, digital innovator, and deliverer of successful high-impact digital firsts. He creates new audience experiences by leveraging technology in novel ways. Tony is internationally recognized as an expert in object-based television and radio program creation and specializes in producing unique and inventive audience experiences. He's an expert in production workflows that deliver both traditional linear media and flexible, responsive, interactive new media experiences that work across different connected devices and in different environments. He was awarded his PhD in personalised and interactive radio in 2015. He's been a member of various technical EBU groups, a committee member of the UK Radio Academy Radio Festival, and the International Broadcasting Convention. He's an author of over 10 international publications and has presented at over 30 international conferences. Tony's a spokesperson for audio and radio advances, having written articles for publications such as Broadcast, Television, and iTech, and has appeared in various media, including BBC News, Sky News, ITN, NPR, BBC Radio 4, and the BBC World Service, talking about the present and future of media. Tony and I met when we both worked for the BBC. I was at BBC Scotland, and Tony was in BBC R&D. Listen to the great conversation we had covering a lot of audio topics. I'd like to say, basically, Tony, welcome to the podcast. And let's hear a little bit about yourself. Just starting out, how you decided that you wanted to work with audio, and we'll kind of let the conversation go from there.
Sure. So I think I got into it when I was a teenager, as a guitarist, sort of learning to play the guitar at school and wanting to be in a band, and tried for a few years to make it in the music industry as a kind of band with friends from college, and we got kind of interest from labels. And this was, when was this? This is kind of early 2000s.
What sort of band? What sort of music? And
it was kind of like, it was fairly. They're well-written songs, but very indie pop music, accessible indie pop music, really. And the four of us tried to make it. So we kind of played some, O2 Festival and a few places like that, and we made quite an original music video, which was seen by quite a lot of people, where we kind of took our instruments. We were a 4-piece band, guitar, bass, drums, vocals. We took our instruments around Manchester and set up in front of a load of CCTV cameras, and played the track. We had like a little boombox thing hidden in the kick drum, and we played along to the track, and then sent letters to the owners of the cameras, and we requesting the footage under the Data Protection Act. So, we were in there, and we had a few pieces of videos back from people that we used to create a music video. We had to do quite a lot of fakery because lots of people didn't, either the cameras weren't real or weren't on or whatever, or they didn't have the footage stored or what have you. But we ended up making a video of CCTV clips, and Yeah, it was good. It was good fun, and it got we were on Sky News and all sorts of stuff, talking about that. Yeah.
All right. Is it available? Can you share
It'll
it?
be on YouTube somewhere.
Okay.
I think not not one of my channels. It was the early days of me not knowing anything about the internet. So we just stuck a copy on YouTube. It wasn't like this. It was before the days of influencers and all this stuff, and we weren't. We were very naive. We were just doing it because it sounded like a cool idea and was quite fun to do, and we needed a cheap way to make a music video. It was never like our intention to go viral or what have you. So we just stuck it up on a YouTube channel with no followers really, and someone a lot more internet savvy basically put it on their YouTube channel, did a very good job of creating metadata. So, and it went viral from their channel, millions of views on theirs, about 300 on ours, because we knew nothing about the internet, or I knew nothing about the internet really in those days.
No, the whole YouTube monetization, particularly for music, that's a whole other. Well, so what was the name of the band, so people can?
Oh yeah, so we were called the Get Out Clause, and if you search Manchester band CCTV video, it'll be in there. I expect in the Google results.
All right, that's very clever. I'll find it. I'll put up a link. Want to see if we can direct them to your link rather than making money for somebody else. Or anyway. I mean, you could, if you put it, you could put something, you should register it with PRS and PPL and then just put in a claim.
You know what? I should do. I don't know. It was, I think it was about 2005, 2006 that we did it.
Yeah.
And I am a member of PRS because I write music for radio drama and radio production now. So, I should add that. I don't know if they backdate.
Actually, they don't.
I didn't think so.
That's the nature of the black box. You know about the black box?
The black box. Tell me about the black box.
Black box is industry jargon, CRO's jargon, meaning the escrow accounts where they hold unclaimed royalties.
Okay. There's probably a lot of those.
There's, as we speak, there's $3 billion sitting in the black boxes globally. And so basically, as an artist, you've got 18 months to make a claim. And if you don't, it reverts into the payout that they give. And basically, they take I've heard up to 75% of it every quarter and just simply pay it out to whoever's at the top of the charts.
Oh, because they're the ones who need it most, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, basically your money's been going to...
Taylor Swift has been getting my money for years.
Exactly. That's the black box. So it's worth getting your metadata in order.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a little plugin for Streamline. We help you make that happen. But anyway, that's not what the podcast is about, but it is a good object lesson about getting,
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were just doing it for fun, really. We kind of never really set out on the journey as a kind of thinking of ourselves as a business. It was just a laugh, and we were playing music and having fun. And there were lots of other bands around that time that were actually, they had a decent manager or what have you that understood what needed to happen behind the scenes.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's just sort of the typical story. There's the other aspect, and I could talk about metadata and copyright forever, But there's the other thing that lots of people don't know about, and it's a little thing called neighboring rights. Have you heard of that?
No, do not know about neighboring rights.
Neighboring rights is PPL. And what that is if you are a player, a musician on a recording, and, you don't own the copyright. You didn't write it.
Yeah.
You don't own the publishing. When, with the proper neighboring rights registered, when the track is played on the radio and on certain, as they call it, non-interactive streaming services, which is internet radio as opposed to like Spotify Apple Music or other, you are entitled to a royalty payment. Yeah. So,
because you read about these musicians, in the 60s and 70s that are session musicians, effectively, and the lines that they came up with on these really famous songs are the songs. The lines that they just sort of came up with in the studio.
Oh yeah.
That's what made the song, and these are just like sessions guys that were there, and they've gone on to have great session careers, but probably not seen a penny from that.
Well, yeah, that's the other aspect of it, is that is in copyright terms just viewed as arrangement. An arrangement is not copyrightable, so it's only the lead line melody and the lyrics that are copyrightable. But if you've got your proper metadata for neighboring rights, at least you'll see a little bit of money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's the hugely famous one of the long-term lawsuit between Jerry Rafferty and Raphael Ravenscroft for the track Baker Street. Yeah. Which has the, memorable saxophone hook at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that lawsuit is still going on, and both of them are dead.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, we've sort of headed off into a tangent, but
it's a strange direction, yes.
Yeah, but get your metadata in place.
Yeah, so that is how I kind of got into music and audio and sound. After the kind of band failed to kind of turn into a megastars. Yeah. I started working for the R&D department at the BBC, where I was doing research into next generation audio formats, audio production, storytelling on the kind of future audio systems, where we were looking at kind of surround sound and different ways of capturing and representing sound, working with production teams. And while I was there, I ended up doing a PhD in object-based radio production, which is where you try to represent an audio experience rather than as a set of speaker feeds, which is the traditional way of doing it, with like a left and a right channel or a surround sound channel, where you represent that scene as some audio data and then some metadata to describe what that audio data is, and maybe some rules about how that should be rendered depending on where it's being consumed and who's listening to it, to give you kind of more flexibility. So you might, as a musician or as a creator of audio, you might want your mix. I mean, if you I don't know if your listeners to this podcast are creators and musicians and what have you.
They tend to be, yeah. That's going to be the focus.
So
be as technical as you want.
So if you're designing an audio experience if you had all the time and all the budget in the world, I would imagine you would perhaps mix it differently if you knew someone was listening on some budget Apple headphones versus someone listening on a massive loudspeaker array in a kind of private cinema. you would probably want to mix it in a very different way. So object-based content production is kind of, how do we do that without having to mix it 100 times? Can we just mix it once with metadata and then create an experience which is tailored to the listener to enhance, what they're hearing, to create more immersive, whether they're on headphones or listening in a white transit van on the M5, or if they're listening in a high-end, binaural head-tracked environments. Can we make something once and render it differently for all those different environments?
Yeah, I remember you're working on that. I think that's around the time that we met at the BBC. And I remember a project, there was a sort of a test project that you did that you put on headphones, and first you were played back a number of different things so you could choose which head transfer.
Yeah.
So we were you, yeah. And then essentially these objects were played back in a binaural format for you.
Yeah, I think we were exploring how important a personalised head-related transfer function is, and there were other cleverer people than me in R&D doing research into how you might go about measuring someone's head-related transfer function without needing to put them in an anechoic chamber and put microphones all over the place and what have you. Could you do it from a smartphone photograph or what have you? That was one of the aspects of the research, was looking at binaural rendering. And my work was more focused on production and the production stages and how you kind of design the experience and the storytelling experience, and how you what production tools you might need to be able to do something. So we made, for example, we made a project called the Vostok incident.
That's what I was going to say. I had submarine in the back of my head.
So it was a fighter. Yeah, so it was a jet fighter that during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And it was a short. I think it's still available online if you search for the Vostok K incident. But if you're going to do that, have a few mobile phones in the same room with you, because the point of that, it wasn't a binaural. It was spatial audio. Yeah. Spatial audio, but how do you do it for a normal person who hasn't got a perfect 5.1 setup in their house and has probably got a sound bar or built-in speakers on their telly, but they might have an old iPad lying around and a couple of old phones, or their friends have all got, the people who are watching it have all got their own phone. So that the concept was, well, if we can synchronize all these devices and design an experience that can be spread out over them, some of the sounds can come out of different places. How do we go about designing that? And we did it in two ways, in that if you do add devices, you start off unlocking additional storylines that work with or without. So the whole experience works with or without them. They just add a layer of storytelling, and then as you add more and more devices, it adds immersion. So it was set in a cockpit of a jet aircraft flying around the skies. So we kind of, there's dogfighting and all sorts of stuff. So you can add explosions and then other immersive elements to the story, as well as an additional kind of line of dialogue or what have you too.
I remember that now. It's funny. Memory is a funny thing, and I was thinking submarine, but that was another immersive theater production that I went to in Glasgow. Yeah. But the Russian word was the thing. But yeah, I remember listening to your project, and I had my laptop, an iPad, and I think an iPod Touch and an iPhone. So it was set around me, and it was, it was pretty cool. And coming out of like the iPhone was kind of a, you know, low bandwidth audio, radio transmission thing.
Yes, that's right.
And sort of the wider story in a stereo fashion through the stereo speakers on the laptop. It was pretty cool. It was very interesting. And
I think we were quite surprised by how, because we were thinking this is going to sound dreadful, all these different models phones with not as good quality speakers in, and actually if you've got a decent set of speakers in front of you for the main kind of client and all of these other devices for the extra bits, actually it's quite a decent immersive experience. Actually, it doesn't sound too bad from an audiophile perspective. It doesn't sound too bad.
And from the let's say creative aspect of editing and putting it all together to tell the story, and particularly you say certain things only appeared if you had the additional device and all of that. How did you go about planning that and thinking about that? Because it's a completely different way of thinking about combining.
Yeah, I think there were two
story.
Yeah, there were kind of two steps to that, really. The first step was just the pure creative step, where we were working with a writer who since I've done a few other things with, who's brilliantly talented TV writer, is where he started through Lucy Writer's Room and the Casualty Doctors Holby City Room, where he still does work for television now, called Ed Selick, who was kind of a kindred spirit in terms of what stories and TV and film we were into, but also is it kind of interested in the technology and playing with the technology. Obviously, as a writer, so it's the story is the kind of core key thing, and we worked. So Ed and I did a lot of head scratching in terms of working out how to what we could do with the story to use these devices. So it's the unlocking of the different storylines. So that was the writing process, which was really interesting. And then when it came to the mix, it was a whole different thing, because the sound designer for it, again, a really talented Eloise Whitmore, who did the sound design for this project. And that was working out how we can put sounds in different places depending on what's going on in the story. But the challenge with that was, and with both of them really, is that the production tools to do this just didn't exist. So we were effectively kind of using a spreadsheet, really, in a combination of Reaper. This gets a bit geeky now, but we're using a combination of Reaper, of Pro Tools, and a spreadsheet that was kind of linked up to Reaper in the middle, where we were putting logic in to say, if this is here, play this. If this isn't here, play that. So there was quite complicated logic, because so if you wanted the sound to be behind you, for instance, if that sound was important to the story and you didn't have a speaker behind you, that would need to come from somewhere else. So it was layers of logic that were kind of created in the spreadsheet. And I think BBC R&D have since gone on to develop some of the tools to create this kind of experience. And I think maybe they're, might need to check this, but I think maybe they're available for people to use online if anyone wants to have a go or have a play at trying to create an immersive piece that works in this way.
And there's other tools out there as well. I know that, Fraunhofer has their MHEG sort of object editor. And then there's, the Dolby Atmos, which is object, but kind of in a different way,
Yeah. They've still got the concept of channel-based audio.
Yeah.
Kind of embedded in their production systems. but they have the chain. You know, they've got the cinemas and everything, so they're in a comfortable position, I think, Dolby, when it comes to developing technologies like this.
Yeah, the MHEG object editor is a bit more flexible. Although I don't think it can do what you just described with the Vostok and things like that. That's a whole other. No, that's
yeah. It's all this narrative. Yeah, it was very. I mean, it can get very complicated. I mean, the Vostok one was perhaps. I mean, that was less complicated. We also created a variable length radio documentary. It was even more complicated, and it had all this logic in, because so for radio features, the way most of them are made is there's interviews are collected, long interviews are collected, and then a story is kind of created, and then a script is written to tell that story with these clips and these interviews that are there, and then they're edited. So there's a script written, and then that's all edited together. And you'll probably come out with a 40-minute piece that needs to be, if you're making for radio, it needs to be made a very specific length for it to fit into the schedule. So that 40-minute piece will probably need to be cut down to 28 minutes or thereabouts. And there is a whole process that the producer goes through to turn this 40 minutes into something that makes sense at 28 minutes. So we kind of took that approach to go, well, okay, let's make one that's 40 minutes long. And then let's work, and maybe it was a bit of a mad thing to embark on to try and work this out, because it gets insanely complicated. But let's break it down into lots of different objects and then define the relationships between all those objects. So, for example, there might be an interview with someone. So if you have a contributor in a documentary, you need to introduce who they are at a certain point in that program.
Mm-hmm.
But that will only happen once. So if you remove that contributor, you also need to remove their introduction. And so that's the simple example of one thing, but then there are more complicated examples. So all of these features that are made have various different narrative trails through them. So they might have questions that are posed at the beginning that need to be answered by the end. And if you're going to cut the question, then you need to cut the answer. You don't want to have the question without the answer, so it needs to work both ways. So, I mean, our objective was, I am the listener, and I'm going to say I want to listen to this documentary, but I've only got a 15-minute commute, so I don't want to hear the half-an-hour version of it. I want to hear the 15-minute version of it, and then have a machine that kind of can trawl through all that logic, throw away the 15 minutes least interesting bits to give you a kind of 15-minute version that works for you. And it was an exploration in trying to define all of the strands and connections and logic between all of the different elements of the story. And that's before we started looking at, music and looping music and some of those kind of communicating techniques for the variable length of stuff where things are still going on. So yeah, that was another really challenging, interesting project that I did while I was at R&D.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating sort of thing because it's breaking apart sort of the traditional way of putting things together, which, even in, well, with the exception of people who work in stuff like live and Fruity Loops and stuff in sort of live music making, traditionally on television, radio, everything is still put together as if you're using tape or film.
Yeah.
Even though you're using a digital nonlinear editor, people are still taking chunks and sticking them end to end across. And maybe putting a little atmosphere in the rear channels. But so you're talking about taking a completely different, approach to that. And so you continued sort of working in that vein.
So now probably so I still work in radio production now, but it's more making radio content and less about R&D. So I probably the most well-known program I work on is called The Skewer, which is a late night Radio 4 satirical comedy that I make with a producer called John Holmes.
And by the way, for people listening, should be on BBC Sounds, so that means pretty much you can get it globally.
Yes, yeah. So The Skewer, I think every episode of The Skewer is available on BBC Sounds. It's UK based, although we do tackle international stories. It's kind of centered probably mostly on UK news and UK politics. We are making an election special as well in a couple of weeks, because I don't know when this podcast will land.
It'll be, I think, September.
September. So we've had an election, and obviously I can speak with confidence and say that Labour have won the election in a landslide. Maybe.
We're getting political, but yes, I like the way the news says, don't judge the polls, because, it could either be a historic landslide or an all-out destruction of the Tory party. So, say nothing is certain yet.
Nothing is certain yet. But so we have an election special. So if this comes out in September, then that will be available to listen to on BBC Sounds. And although we haven't made it yet, because we make it, I can talk a bit more about how we make it. But we haven't made that yet. We haven't started making it yet. We will start making it probably a few days before it is broadcast. And it will be, I think it's on the 10th, which is good for us because there are various media rules in the UK which say what you can and can't say during an election period. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to The Skewer, we don't shy away from controversy really in that program. So we're given quite a long leash by the BBC in terms of allowing us to make stuff and be funny and be satirical and make poignant points as well.
Yeah, so describe the process of putting an episode of The Skewer together.
Okay, so I should probably say that the Skewer is we don't record anything for The Skewer. We don't write any dialogue or record any sounds or record any clips. It's all made from clips that have been on the news in the last few weeks, or we do quite a lot of mashups with contemporary culture as well. So for example, we cut news programs with a Hollywood film or a TV program to make a satirical point. I add quite a lot of music underneath it, which I'll create with kind of virtual music. So I might record some guitars and that kind of stuff underneath, but none of the actual words, apart from the credits, which I just get Alexa to read for us. So it's not scripted in a traditional sense of radio comedy. If you think about programs like the News Quiz and the Now Show and stuff like that, it's not scripted in that sense. And because it's current affairs, we have to turn it around very quickly. And so John and I are the two kind of main people behind putting it together. But there is a whole team of contributors And it's a completely open door policy for people to submit ideas to. So if any of your listeners want to try and submit an idea to the Skewer, they'd be more than welcome to if it's funny. So the way that it works is all of those ideas are kind of filtered through by John. He'll be sent lots of ideas. We also have a kind of core team of writers who are commissioned to come up with ideas as well. And he will. So take one example that we did a couple of series ago. Matt Hancock was the health secretary at the time. The NHS in the UK was in a not great state because we had a global pandemic and various other factors. And there were lots of headlines that week saying the NHS is broken. So someone emailed John with an idea just to say, well, what if Matt Hancock took the NHS to the repair shop, which is a British program about people who take their old toys to be fixed in what is essentially a kind of workshop shed type thing. And John was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Go and find me some clips. So John gets sent in either clips or links to iPlayer or wherever the program is, YouTube or what have you. And we kind of build a script from those clips. So there are obviously clips of Matt Hancock being interviewed about the NHS. And then they managed to find an episode of the repair shop where Matt was the guy who'd taken his, whatever it was, doll's house or whatever, to the repair shop to be fixed. So the repair shop presenters are talking to Matt, so we can use those clips in the mix. So John would sort of pull that script together and then send me all of those clips. And then I would start kind of stitching and mixing and pulling them together. And we kind of, the way we approach it is, it's not a sketch show, but there are definite kind of different sketches where we talk about different news stories. So we would start stitching those together and pulling them together. And while it is, we are using lots of clips, the concept of the show that it doesn't sound like there's lots of clips. It sounds like a river of sound. It's all mixed in, and there's lots of sound design elements and musical elements that kind of go together. So it is about kind of making the whole thing flow and seamless, even though it is a collection of recordings from lots of different places that are put together.
Okay, what tools do you use to put it together?
So I use Pro Tools as a DAW. The other tool that we use is Zoom for collaborating between me and John while he's getting stuff together and I'm mixing it in Pro Tools. And then I've got a host of far too many plugins that I use to bed things together and to mix things and to make different conversations that happened in different times sound like they're happening in the same place, in the same room and stuff like that.
What do you find is the sort of twofold thing? What's the biggest challenge in putting it all together, and what do you have the most fun doing?
Well, it's all fun. I really enjoy all of it. It's great. It's a great experience, and we've been doing it. So when it started, right at the beginning, nobody really knew what it was. John spoke to the commissioner at Radio 4 and sort of tried to explain he wanted to make this thing. And I think she said, I don't really know what you're talking about, John. Go and make me a version of it and make a pilot effectively, and then I'll understand, and we'll make some more if it's good. So, and then John rang me and had probably a similar conversation saying, well, I want to make this thing and I want it to be kind of sound arty and sound heavy and be about the quality of the sound, immersive sound experience. But it's going to be topical comedy as well. And I was like, yeah, I don't really know what you're talking about. Let's try and make it. And we kind of got together with in a kind of a writer's room scenario and tried to work out what this thing would be. And it's kind of evolved into something that's quite recognizable now, I think. And it's not like a lot else that's on radio. It's quite different to most. Certainly, radio for topical comedy, it's completely different from everything that's there.
Oh yeah, I mean that just sounds absolutely remarkable because, well, for people from the inside of it and even people from the outside of it, what you just described is not sort of what people would think of as a process in a huge organization like the BBC of, gee, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's go ahead and make it.
Yeah, and I think, do you know what, that's one of the great things about working in radio and on audio is it's not actually that expensive to make something compared to TV.
Yeah.
And I don't, this wouldn't have happened in television, I don't think. It just wouldn't have happened because it was a risk at the beginning, but you can afford to take a risk when you're not putting up too much money to make that risk. And, on television, it's just, there's so many people involved in a production. And, the Skewer is a pretty lean production in terms of how many people are involved with it. We don't have to hire studios. We don't have to pay actors. We don't have to do all of that kind of stuff. It's just a core team. We love working on it, making it.
And thinking from, because it is in its own way, I think it shares a lot with maybe less now, but early hip hop, as it were, just sort of these collages of samples and stuff. Have you found yourself, because it's politics and it's politics very close to when it's actually happened. Have you found yourself, going, wow, this is really, really great. I love what we've just put together. There's no way we can actually broadcast this.
But I don't think we've ever spent a long time making something that we know we wouldn't be able to broadcast.
Okay.
So John is a really experienced producer. He's got in trouble with Ofcom before. I'm not going to say any more about that, but you can go and Google it if you want.
Okay.
And he's experienced. I'm pretty experienced making radio as well. So we both know when we've made an episode, we'll kind of look at each other and go, they're going to ask us questions about this one, or this is the bit where because it goes through a compliance process at the BBC, even though it's close to the wire, we're delivering it a few hours before it's broadcast. But it is always checked by a BBC compliance person who is brilliant. His name's Roger, and he's fantastic, and he really understands what we're doing. And he's always comes to it with an attitude of, okay, why have you done this? It's not, you can't do that. You're not doing that. It's can you justify this? Can you give us an editorial reason why you've used these clips here, or you're telling this story in this particular way? And there are times when he kind of asks those questions, and we might adjust things if we feel like we need to, but most of the time, we're not asked to make changes. We're not asked to kind of creatively compromise what we're doing at all. The BBC have been, and that team have been brilliant for letting us kind of do what we want to do with it. It's been great, and we get away with a lot of stuff that I think other programs might not always get away with. So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I think we hold the record for the highest number of uses of the C word on British radio, certainly for Radio 4. And So what happened was Jeremy Hunt was reinstalled as the Chancellor of the Exchequer a year or so ago, and the idea for the kind of the skits we did on that was using the Ting Tings track, That's Not My Name, and then finding every single clip where a journalist has mispronounced his name when they've introduced him. And we cut it all together, and it was great. It was really funny. And John and I, it was quite a big, it was the finishing, it was the grand, the ending of the whole program. And we sent it over to Radio 4, and John were like, I don't know what we're going to do if they say no, we can't put this on the radio. I don't know what we're going to do. And I think they came back with I think the question they asked is every single one of those genuine was broadcast. It was a mistake. We've not made any up. We've not faked anything. Every single one of those introductions was something that happened on Newsnight or the Today program or what have you. And we were like, no, yep, they're all genuine times. And they were like, okay, that's fine then. We can broadcast that.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. And just for listeners outside of the UK, the C word kind of has a different resonance than it does, say, in America. And the other aspect of it is Jeremy Hunt has unfortunately held two positions in the government that begin with a C. So he's been Jeremy Hunt, the Culture Secretary, and Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And, in a typical sort of Spoonerism, it's gotten switched. And I remember the first one, I think wasn't it Andrew Marr who did it or whatever, this very...
There's been quite a few because we used, I think, every single one of them in the end of that episode.
I remember the first time, it came out, somebody made the comment saying, yeah, it's going to be very difficult to explain to my children just what a culture secretary is.
Yeah. So that was great. But it was really good we've got a really, really good relationship with the compliance department and they totally understand. And I think the audience as well understands what the skewer is and understands that we're close to the bone a lot of the time, and we do tackle. I mean, it's comedy, but we do tackle quite poignant subjects that comedy shows would not go near.
Yeah, exactly. And also for people outside of the UK, Radio 4 is not just sort of the talk radio element of the BBC, but it's where the news is and sort of has a bit of gravitas. It's not shock jocks and, that sort of thing. So
it's an institution in the UK. It's a broadcasting institution. Yeah.
So it's kind of great to hear that sort of element of comedy being done, because this is journalism as well. What you're doing, it's satire.
Yeah, we have people on Twitter or X, whatever it is you want to call it this week, that say it's the main way they get the news. I mean, I don't think I'd recommend that, to be honest. But it's it's a great show to make. Last year we made a lot of them. I think we had 3 series last year. This year we've got 2 series, which is a lot more manageable because it's a lot of work and we can't start early.
Right.
Every single week. So at the end, not all the time, but quite often at the end of an episode, we have like a musical track interspersed with a story of that's going on at the time. And it's quite often there'll be lyrics of the song which kind of help tell the story with clips from the news played in. And obviously the song, I need to cut the song up to pieces in order to make it work with the clips that are played in. and so I'm re-recording a lot of the time,
Right.
piano tracks and guitar tracks, and having to add like half bars in here to make the timing work. With the clips, so it sounds nice and flows, but musically makes sense as well with the lyrics that are being sung in, and that's a time-consuming process because we're kind of we're making a concept album of the news every week, and every week I say to John, "Oh yeah, you might want to get me the end early. Please get me the end early because it takes me so long to put it together." I think that so answer the question that you asked earlier. That's probably the trickiest bit, the hardest bit, because of the time pressure. And we are, John and I are both uncompromising in terms of how it needs to sound really good.
Yeah.
Every week, it's not a live radio, and we can't go, "Oh, this is good enough." It's like it's got to be. It's we both say it's like making a kind of a prog rock concept album of the news every week, and you know what? It is a bit like that, and that is how much time we put into making sure that everything sounds right. So you can go back and listen to it again, and it's still a really rewarding experience.
I like that description of it. I mean, that is very much the way it feels listening to it. And it is very, I mean, you can see your background, in it. It is very musical. I mean, it even just in the points where it's just dialogue going back and forth. There's a sense of a rhythm. There's a sense of sections moving from one to the next, and very, very prog rocky, I think.
I mean, even in those sketches and sections that don't have musical beds or don't have music kind of as an integral part of them, that they're always mixed to sound comfortable, like they're in the same world.
Yeah.
So if we're mixing an old Disney film with some aspect of the news, then I will be making all of those clips sound like they're from the same source. And quite often will disappear into a world of being on vinyl with scratch sounds and bandwidth, or we'll go into a tape or the television or the radio or what have you, and then we'll go hi-fi into a different section. So it's all very considered and carefully bedded together, so it flows.
I think maybe another comparison as well, because it's just popped into my head. That's very much, and once again, it's not. There's music, but it's not telling the audience they need to listen to it. But there's also, a resonance of things like all the work of Hank Shockley and the Bomb Squad with Public Enemy, because essentially they made music out of non-musical elements. They weren't cutting together R&B samples. They were using sirens and voices and gunfire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to create a rhythm track.
Yeah.
And it's just a kind of a remarkable thing to have all of those, kind of tiny, intricate edits, one after another, and have it fit together as a singular piece.
Yeah, it's great. It is sound art as much as it is kind of mixing a comedy program, and we've won various awards for sound art as well for the program, which is really nice to get those.
Yeah, because I like the way you describe it, and what you do is putting vinyl scratches or room tone or ambience and things like that to feel in the same room, because it does not, and people have done other stuff, Cheech and Chong, for example, where it's, feels like changing the station on a radio. and jumping back,
Yep.
and the skewer doesn't sound like that. It doesn't have a cutaway feeling.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we have invented our own rules, really, in terms of how we can move from kind of section to section with sound. And it's, it's nice to play with sound. So I mean, I think there was one example in the last series where there was a story about outside. I don't know if it was about bees or the countryside or something, and we kind of finished it off into ambience of the countryside with bees flying past. Because a lot of, I mean, if you're going to listen to this, I strongly recommend you use headphones. I mean, it still works on speakers, but it's really immersive, and we do sneak in little bits of binaural and stuff occasionally in it. But these bees were kind of zooming past your head, and then there was a story there's a Formula One story about something or other, and I morphed those bees into racing cars, Formula One cars zooming past your head. So we've got a license to play around and do like quite fun, creative things like that. But we could just, we have some. We just used a glitch, a noise, a distorted to go into a different story. So we use various different techniques to kind of mix things together.
Oh, and story, a friend of mine was telling me, a guy I worked with, a music video producer back in New York in the 80s. And this will get very Anaraki in surround techniques. So we're talking about matrix encoding, which is, A plus B, A minus B, et cetera, et cetera. So a way to encode surround sound in an analog signal as opposed to discrete digital channels. And so he had, that's like Dolby Surround early days and things like that. And he was telling me it was really fun to listen to, and particularly like Public Enemy, who used a lot of different sources, but other people as well, listen to it on his surround system, because samples that they'd taken off of like videotape from a film or something would light up the back speakers. So he's listening to something that's basically been mixed for stereo, but all of a sudden, boom, there's, something coming out of the back speakers.
Yeah, I mean, this year I mix it mostly on headphones, and check it on speakers. Yeah. And I adapt it, but the mix is done mostly on headphones. And so that is the way that I'd recommend people listen to it. You can listen to it on your kitchen speaker if you want to, but there is a lot going on. There are a lot of sounds going on. There's lots of clever jokes going on that I think you get much more immersive experience of the whole thing if you lie down in the dark with your headphones on.
Well, okay, that's the recommendation. There's also, and it probably works not quite as well, but similarly, so many people listen in their cars, and particularly if it's in a podcast sort of environment, and sort of the newer cars, amazing sound systems in there. It's kind of like sitting inside of a pair of headphones. So I imagine you get, unless I've got the windows open and a car full of kids shouting or whatever, but probably a good listening environment as well.
Yeah, the cars are very controlled listening environments, because car manufacturers can be clever about the balancing. You know exactly where people's heads are going to be, so you can tailor it to calibrate it so that it sounds good in those positions. And it doesn't need to sound good in any other positions because people aren't going to have their heads there.
Yeah, sort of less about head transfer functions and more about, I guess, auto transfer functions. But yeah, that's a whole other soundscaping for cars, where they actually feed in fake engine noise for, to make you feel like you're driving, a performance vehicle. And it's pretty fascinating, some of that
it is
stuff.
interesting. I mean, I've got an electric car, so it's at slow speeds, it's a very quiet experience. And then when you go a bit quicker, if you're on the motorway, sometimes it's basically the same as driving any other car in terms of the noise levels, because of the road noise and the wind noise.
Well, the fact is, and particularly, although the question is, why does it actually exist? The sort of Porsche and Maserati SUVs, which are kind of pointless vehicles to begin with, but they use these artificial, performance car sounds, because they're unbelievably soundproofed, like, most SUVs are. So they feed you, people want to feel like they're getting, this engine noise, pipe noise, all of these sorts of things. And it's, there's all of these things going on.
That probably really upsets all the acoustic engineers that have spent so long trying to reduce the noise level in the car, to have it piped in through the speakers.
Exactly. But, the people who buy those cars want that feeling. Want that, they want to sound like they're, I don't know, powering a craft with, I don't know, a Volvo diesel boat engine. Which they can't even, they're not allowed to have that sound on the outside of the car these days either, because of city noise or, ordinances, but kind of fascinating. Let's say how about personal projects, or is this kind of taking up all of your creative effort?
I think in terms of my kind of creative time, that's obscure, takes up a fair amount. I've just made a radio drama that's on BBC Sounds at the moment called Money Gone, which is worth a listen if people want to go. Again, that was with Ed Selick, the writer I mentioned earlier on.
Right.
And it's a 5-part, again, immersive. Eloise did the sound design on it. Immersive experience with a great cast who were brilliant to work with. And that was all recorded. We recorded in studio, but we recorded it as if we were on location. So it was kind of like a location recording. Mm-hmm. Just because you get a real authenticity to the sound when you record it like that. And it's a 5-part series that we did for Radio 4, where it tells the story of you wake up one morning and find that your bank account is empty, and there's no money in your bank, and you check all of your accounts are zero. Your credit card's zero. Well, maybe that's a good thing. Your mortgage is zero. All the money's gone, basically. And it's the kind of story of how society reacts to this scenario where the money's all been deleted and moved to somewhere else.
Well, that'll be fun. Well, I'll definitely check that out. I saw you posting a few things about it. Great. Well, we've been talking for a little over an hour. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, great. So it's good to catch up with you.
It was fantastic catching up with Tony, and be sure to check out The Skewer, which you can find on the BBC Sounds app. You're listening to How I Made It, the Streamline podcast. For musicians, podcasters, video makers, graphic designers, and more, Streamline is the collaboration platform to build your creative future. We turn chaos into creativity. Check us out at www.streamline-media.net.